back to Vinyl Friday, where I go through my records like a big nerd and talk about why I love them. Today's episode is our next stage in the White Album Peregrination, which, if you're unfamiliar, to the uninitiated, is a track-by-track, month-by-month journey, intrepid journey, if you will, through the White Album, beginning at the beginning, ending at the end, whenever it is that we may get there, which, by my estimates, is in just over 2 years' time. Today we're going to be listening to a song of Paul's that he remains proud of to this day. It is widely considered to be among the Beatles' finest compositions. The song is Blackbird, and it sounds like this. Oh, also, I forgot to say, my record player's needle was not, in fact, broken. It just needed a really good clean with some isopropyl alcohol. We are back in business. I don't have to try and locate an incredibly rare stylus on the internet.
Blackbird singing in the dead of night.
Before we get stuck into the history and breakdown of this song, I just wanted to remind everyone that for the duration of this White Album Peregrination, I'm going to be making an accompanying lino-cut print postcard for every song. This is this month's song, postcard, not song. I'm quite proud of this. I think this might be my favorite of the ones that I've made so far. If you would like to buy one of these postcards and have me write a little note to you and send it to your home address or work address or a friend's address or whatever address you supply, one thing. Please note, these do tend to sell out, so get in quickly. However, if there is one that you would especially like that has sold out, just pop a note in the comments and I'll make sure to do an extra run of those next time. So I'll have those listed and, periodically check in on them because I do second and third runs of some of the more popular ones just in case anyone has missed out. Cool. That's postcards. Let's start talking about the song. What I find fascinating about Blackbird, the song, as opposed to the movie, is that its ancestral lines are wildly disparate. So let's look at the first of Blackbird's parents. And that's J.S. Bach. The guitar part of the song is strongly influenced by Baroque music, and also I will definitely be cycling between Baroque and Baroque because I was raised in both North America and New Zealand, which is still a Commonwealth country. So, as I was saying, central to Baroque music is counterpoint, and counterpoint refers to the relationship between two or more distinct melodies within a piece of music. They are played simultaneously and they are harmonically linked but melodically distinct, if that makes sense. Paul McCartney took inspiration for Blackbird from what I would argue is one of the most well-known compositions of the Baroque period, J.S. Bach's Borean E minor.
There was one little thing we used to do, which was a sort of semi-classical thing.
Except he didn't really know how to play it.
Well, it was actually classical, but we made it semi. And it went like this. It actually goes da-da-dun, 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 but we didn't know that second half. But I always liked this little... So years later, I then adapted it into the song Blackbird.
There are two melodic lines in Blackbird.
It's got a melody going on the top and a bass line going at the same time.
Operating in a harmonically linked way, but melodically independent. I'm waffling. The guitar correspondent can tell you more. All right, so this is the bass part for Blackbird. And this is the treble part. Now we're going to put them together, but first I would like to note that I play it incorrectly. Most guitarists play it incorrectly because Paul McCartney has this very distinctive and difficult to imitate style. He does a similar thing on Yesterday, where he kind of flicks the strings with his index finger, which creates a sort of half strum, half picked sound. So something like that. I've never been able to get it exactly right.
You were always waiting for the moon to rise.
So you will be able to clearly hear the treble and bass parts together, but it is not exactly what Paul McCartney plays. If you want exactly what Paul McCartney plays, you know where to find it. Back to you. Blackbird is also in G major, which is a relative major to E minor, which of course is the key of Bach's Borean E minor. It's right there in the name. Piano correspondent, can you tell us more about that, please? Hello everyone, it's me, your piano correspondent. The Bach piece, the Bourrée, is in E minor. E minor features these notes. Blackbird is in G major. G major features exactly the same notes, but if you started on G instead of starting on E. So E, G. Same notes, different starting notes. That's why we say that G major is in a relative relationship to E minor. They have the same notes. That's all. Easy. I think that's all I have to say in this entire episode, so it's been great. Have a good one. Paul notes that the Beatles were Bach fans, and I think he is overstating the case a bit, but I'll allow it.
Of all the classical composers, I think for the Beatles and me since, Bach has always been an influence. We always used to say when we were asked who's your favourite classical composer, it was Bach, probably because we didn't know anyone else.
Blackbird is not Paul McCartney's first foray into Baroque music. For example, on the track For No One, there is a section of the song in which he uses contrary motion counterpoint. That sounds like this. And in her eyes you see nothing, no sign of love behind her tears, cry for no one, a love that should have lasted years. They even recorded For No One on a Baroque keyboard instrument, the clavichord. Before the White Album Peregrination, we were on a Revolver journey, and I did do a deep dive on For No One, so if you'd like to watch that and see me play a clavichord, which was fun, you can do so here. I'm not the only one who has noted this link. Leonard Bernstein, the master, also made reference to it.
Back to the music. What else do I like about it? I like the eclecticism of it. Its freedom to absorb any and all musical styles and elements, like high Bach trumpet. That's Penny Lane, Beatles.
And to be honest, Baroque music was kind of having a moment in the mid to late 1960s. For example, in 1968, correct me if I'm wrong, editor Nancy, Procol Harum released a song called Whiter Shade of Pale, womp womp, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with, which was inspired by Bach's Air on a G... I am an adult. Air on a G string. Which is a perfectly valid title for a song. And you had Baroque instrumentation, in particular the harpsichord, cropping up in everything from... Actually, you know what? I think it's time for a harpsichord montage!
For your love, Carolina. Monday, I'll take a
slowly blow your little mind. Just walk away, Renee. Tell her to make me a direction. We will come and dance near you. You and I travel to the beat of a different drum. I've looked at clouds from both sides now. Love me too tight, I'm gone away. I want her, she wants me.
So why the sudden and short-lived obsession with harpsichords? I think an earlier example of Baroque composition in the Beatles' canon of work might point us towards the answer. Have a listen to this.
A sudden new counterpoint.
That's the solo from In My Life, which was performed and prepared by George Martin, their producer. And you can clearly hear contrapuntal composition in that solo, right? And in the composition of Blackbird, Paul is not only drawing from areas of music history that are largely unaligned with 60s pop and rock music, despite Paul being a self-professed Bach stan.
He's got good tunes. You know, he's almost a pop star.
He's also drawing from his own past. As a songwriter, I don't often cast my mind back to what I was doing musically as a teenager. But Paul McCartney, by contrast, often reached back into his past for musical inspiration, sometimes lifting entire songs from his teenage self. In the case of songs like When I'm 64,
Will you still need me? Will you still feed me when I'm 64?
and I'll Follow the Sun.
For tomorrow may rain, so I'll follow the sun.
He wrote those when he was in his teens. It's too much talent, it's not fair. So that's Bach, the Baroque. That's our first major influence. The second Blackbird parent, I'm sorry, I'll stop saying that, was the US Civil Rights Movement. The US Civil Rights Movement has a complex and fascinating and often very painful history behind it. I couldn't cover everything about it within an entire series, let alone a single episode, so I'm going to be narrowing my focus on and around events that Paul himself has specifically referred to. The civil rights movement in the US from sort of the late 1950s to the early 1960s was largely based around undoing legal segregation. Paul on several occasions has pointed specifically to the Little Rock Nine as providing inspiration for Blackbird. Actually, what's playing right now is Rocky Raccoon, and that is all wrong. Speaking of which, I'm going to have a special guest for Rocky Raccoon. That's exciting. Paul says, quote, I was sitting around with my acoustic guitar and I'd heard about the civil rights troubles that were happening in the 60s in Alabama, Mississippi, Little Rock in particular. I just thought it would be really good if I could write something that, if it ever reached any of the people going through those problems, it might give them a little bit of hope. So I wrote Blackbird. The Little Rock Nine were a group of students who in 1957 were facing violent opposition to being allowed to attend the otherwise all-white Little Rock Central High School. This was a test case of a Supreme Court ruling that found school segregation unconstitutional. The governor of Arkansas, I've forgotten his first name, but his surname is Fulbus. He disagreed with the Supreme Court, and he sent in the National Guard to prevent these kids from entering the campus. High school students, again. After 3 weeks of this nonsense, President Eisenhower finally sent in federal troops to escort the students onto the campus so that they could commit the radical crime of attending high school. In 2016, Paul actually played Little Rock and he got to meet 2 of the Little Rock Nine. This period of the civil rights movement coincided with the Beatles' touring years. And I would like to point out that the Beatles themselves refused to play before segregated audiences in the United States.
All of them, by the way, were very emphatic about Jacksonville. They said if there was going to be segregation of any kind, we're not going.
We didn't play like those people or that people, you know what I mean? We just played to people.
It was amazing that the 4 of them, young men seeing the world, started to act up and blow back on this very, very hot and sensitive issue, knowing that it would really irritate a lot of Americans.
The movement from the mid-60s to the late 60s pivoted to being more broadly about things like systemic racism, racial disparities in living conditions, employment, and treatment by law enforcement. During, for example, the so-called Long Hot Summer of 1967, there were somewhere in the vicinity of 150 riots that took place across the United States. You can actually hear Paul talking about it with Donovan when they were kicking around in the studio one day.
I sang it to Diana Ross the other night. She took offence. Not really. But I didn't mean it like that originally. I remember. Really? Yeah, I just read something in the paper about riots and that.
In April of 1968, which would have been right about when they started recording the White Album. I don't have the exact date, but you know who does? Editor Nancy. Editor Nancy here. They started recording the White Album on the 30th of May, 1968, so it wasn't exactly at the same time, but it had been in the news recently. So in April of 1968, Martin Luther King Jr., who was a well-known proponent of nonviolent protest and really an icon of the movement, was killed with violence. He was assassinated. He was murdered. Those are all valid words to describe what happened to Martin Luther King Jr. May he rest in peace. And the thing is, the Beatles were avid readers of printed media, as we call it. At the time, they'd have called it the newspaper, or the news oh boy. So these issues would not have escaped their notice. So given this, given the Bach thing and the civil rights thing, I think we can view Paul McCartney as his own Blackbird of sorts. The man is a magpie. His attention can be grabbed by anything shiny, and he has the skill to nurture those shiny things into some of the greatest music of the last 100 years. Speaking of last 100 years, my sister pointed out to me on Reddit, a Redditor was playing music to their kids, who are Gen Alpha children. And those kids will be in their 40s by the 2060s, which means that the music of the Beatles will still have listeners 100 years on. So that answers that question, I guess. Will the Beatles still be relevant in 100 years? Yeah, definitely. Anyway, distractible. This is why, in a series about the White Album, I'm covering both Bach and Martin Luther King Jr. in the same episode. I think the time has come for us to break down this song. Let's do this. This song really encapsulates the sweetness of hope with a quiet arrangement, simple chords, a major key opening. There are three main components to this song: Paul's voice, Paul's guitar, Paul's tapping toe. It's your drum correspondent. I'm just going to break that down for you. It goes like this. She just likes being a part of it. His vocal delivery, given the instrumentation, is suitably sweet and gentle in the verses of this song. It's so sweet. I think this might be one of Paul's sweetest vocal performances for me. I think I'll do a video on that at some point in the future.
Take these sunken eyes and learn to see.
So pretty. He had such a pretty voice. He also had a raucous voice, if that's what he wanted to do with it. But he could be so sweet in places, and yeah, this is one of them. When we get to the line, take these broken wings and learn to fly, or take these sunken eyes and learn to see, the melody moves into a minor key.
Take these broken wings and learn to fly.
And also at the line, all your life.
All your life.
And I think in those moments, he's capturing tension and loss and tribulation. There's a bittersweetness to those moments in the song. There's also, as we saw from the guitar correspondent earlier in the episode, a lot of chromatic movement in the guitar melodies. Hello, it's Editor Nancy again. I don't think that the anchor adequately explained what that means. There are a certain number of notes in a scale that make up a major or minor scale. When you play chromatically, you're playing all of the notes in between, the ones that don't feature in the scale, so it's all 12 instead of all 8. Dum 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 dum. Dum dum dum. Dum 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 dum. First going up. And then going back down again. And that really gives a sense of being flung around by circumstance. One of the things I love about this song is that the arrangement, the vocal, the lyric, they never overperform. There's no vocal adornment. He's not doing anything especially fancy in his singing. And there are no hyper-specific lyrics either. He's not explicitly singing about the Little Rock Nine. He's not specifically talking about Bach. Last week's episode was about ecological protest songs, or as someone told me, granola rock. And we were listening to the song Where Did the Children Play by Cat Stevens. If you would like to watch that episode, you can do so here. It's actually one of my favorite episodes that I've made. It wasn't about the Beatles, but I do sometimes talk about other music. And in it, I was trying to make the point that often when songs of protest, which I think this one can just be considered, if the lyrics are too specific, it begins to take away from the art and it can make it difficult to enjoy the song from a musical perspective. It can be kind of distracting. And I think good protest songs strike a balance between the message and the music. This song, I think, does that. It's maybe a little bit more general than most protest songs, but I don't think Paul intended it necessarily as a protest so much as a song of hope. In which case, he nailed it. When we come to the Blackbird fly chorusy, bridgy thing, the song moves into much more bluesy influence. Right here.
Blackbird fly.
So the verse of Blackbird is centered around G. The chorusy section, the Blackbird fly, I think I called it a bridge before, whatever, hovers around C chords. When we come to this chord here, that kind of sits outside of C major. So it sounds a little out of place. So that's the first thing that gives it kind of a bluesy feel. The second time, we go to an A, and from C to A is also kind of a weird transition because A major doesn't fit within the C major family. A minor does, but not A major. So he's moving between sort of parallel universes of chords, if you will. It's also explicitly bluesy on that A chord because this note here is the seventh. It's the dominant seventh, I believe it's called. And that is what defines an A7 chord. Those seventh chords are the cornerstone of blues music. So he's playing with that here. And then when he sings Into the Light, he's playing a beautiful, simple little D chord, but what he's singing is, which creates that chord, which is also incredibly bluesy. Into the light. He's also bending his notes at this point. He hasn't done this prior in the song. It's been very clean and very straight. Same with the chords. Very clean, very, straightforward, no embellishments. Here, he's bending his notes. Into the light, a dark black night. Played to a different rhythm, it sounds so bluesy. Very bluesy, right? I think part of the magic of Blackbird is the transition from very straight, clean chords to the really bluesy stuff. Interestingly, I think this kind of encapsulates what the anchor's been trying to say this whole time. This is very Bach. This is blues, and blues, of course, kind of originated in African American communities. It's more complicated than that, but for all intents and purposes, we've got Baroque European music and American blues. The man's a genius. I don't know what to say.
Into the light of a dark black night.
This is the only moment in the song where his vocal strays from the simple sweetness of the verses. It's that into the light. And I love this detail because lyrically, I think this is the crux of the song. This is the central message. It is encouragement. As I said, he doesn't point specifically to the civil rights movement because the point of the song generally is you can do this. The backbone of this song is that lyrical message, fly into the light. And that messaging combined with a little vocal boost really drives that go get 'em thesis of the song home. God, that was a convoluted sentence. It really drives home the message of this song. There we go. That's it. I did it. I got it. And here's the thing. that's it. That's kind of all I have to say about Blackbird in terms of the breakdown. I mentioned in last week's episode that it's very easy to make a big song sound impressive. If you take, as an example, A Day in the Life, that is a song that is structurally complex and dynamic. It makes excellent use of sonic contrast. And of course, there's that unassailable orchestral roar. That is an impressive song. It was always going to be. It was designed to be impressive. You know, it is breathtaking, and it took a lot of effort to get it there. Blackbird has, as we mentioned, 3 musical elements and some twittery bird sounds at the end. We broke it down, and there really wasn't that much to say compared to other episodes we've done. And yet, the song is breathtakingly impressive. And therein lies the magical mystery of the Beatles. How's he doing that? I don't know. I gave you all the constituent musical parts. I don't have the answer.
But that's the Beatles, always unpredictable and a bit more inventive than most.
Whatever it is, we love it. So thank you, Sir Paul, for this piece of music. With that said, some might ask whether a song like Blackbird has much relevance to the present day. I wouldn't put much stock in a question like that, but we will answer it in good faith. Nonetheless, in 2024, Beyoncé released her version of this song. Albeit with an extra I in the name. I'm not really sure what that's about. I would welcome enlightenment from the comments section on that. The track features Paul McCartney's original 1968 instrumentation, with his blessing, of course. The piece of work that it's on is written to be a country album. Unfortunately, it's kind of an act of rebellion for a black woman to release country music, despite the fact that black people were kind of central to the creation of country music as a genre. Again, that is a whole other episode that I'm not going to get into today. Beyoncé made a surprise appearance at the 2016 Country Music Awards performing alongside the Chicks.
With his head held high, he told me not to cry. Oh, my daddy said shoot.
Following that performance, an artist named Travis Tritt tweeted, I quote, "I love honest-to-God country music and feel the need to stand up for it at all costs. We don't need pop or rap artists to validate us." More like Travis Twitt, am I right? This was possibly the impetus behind the recording of Beyoncé's 2024 country album. I forgot to name it before. It's called Cowboy Carter. She says the album was, quote, "born out of an experience I had years ago where I did not feel welcomed, and it was very clear that I wasn't." With Cowboy Carter in 2024, Beyoncé became the first black woman to top Billboard's country music charts. Ever. And that proved to be controversial. She was snubbed by the Country Music Awards. She didn't even receive a nomination. Certain country stations refused to play her music. Reddit's country subreddit became an absolute quagmire. In Beyoncé's words, "My hope is that years from now, the mention of an artist's race as it relates to releasing genres of music will be irrelevant." So yeah, I'd say that Blackbird is still relevant in the 2020s, and it seems that Paul McCartney would agree. When Beyoncé's version of the song was released, he said this, "I'm so happy with Beyoncé's version of my song. I think she does a magnificent version of it, and it reinforces the civil rights message that inspired me to write the song in the first place." People took issue with that. They said that Paul McCartney was retconning the song, but as we heard him saying in 1968, it was inspired by riots that he'd been hearing about. So he's not retconning anything. Jesus, people, do your research. He continues, "When I saw the footage on the television in the early 60s of the black girls being turned away from school, I found it shocking, and I can't believe that still in these days there are places where this kind of thing is happening now. Anything my song and Beyoncé's fabulous version can do to ease racial tension would be a great thing, and that makes me very proud. And so you should be, Paul. So you should be." And that's it for me. That's everything I have to say about Blackbird. If you enjoyed this episode or you would like to support any of the things I do, or buy a postcard, I'll leave links in the description to my Buy Me a Coffee page where you are most welcome to make a donation, but no pressure, my friends. A massive thank you to everybody who has made a donation or signed up as a member or bought a Beatles postcard. You're kind of unofficially sponsoring the show, so I really appreciate you. If you're curious about what any of my original music sounds like, there will be a link in the description to that as well. My band Tweed will still be releasing an album this year. It's taking longer than we anticipated because it's the 2020s and music is released differently now than it was even 3 years ago. There's a whole protocol to follow and it takes time. But we will be releasing singles still shortly. Thank you for your patience, those of you who are waiting eagerly. It is coming. Yeah, I think that's everything. Thanks for hanging out with me. I'll see you here next week for, I think the classic album that has won the poll is Pet Sounds. People had some opinions about it. I was really surprised. But I am looking forward to breaking down, honestly, some of the most beautiful music of the 1960s that wasn't written by a Beatle, but was inspired by Beatles. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. It's not next week yet. Have a great weekend. Jesus. Okay, try again. Oh. This is surprisingly difficult without the bass part. Come on, John. It's not your turn. I am talking to myself again. At least until Friday. Razzle dazzle. And in the there. Come on, you can do this. You know the problem is my cats. That's what's happening to my stylus. So much cat hair.